man. Hey everyone, it took me a minute to get here, but I'm here. Let's see. Hey Mike, how you doing? Just posting some stuff in the chat here that might be good for reference. See how that goes. All right. Sorry for anybody who tuned in right on time. I just couldn't get it to go. Hey David. Oh man. Probably last thing, David, that you need is more talk about shell voicings, but I'm here. If you have any questions. Let me just blow this up a little bit so I can see the chat. Jamie, hey, good to see you. So let's see. I'm going to just talk a little bit and play a little bit. And if you have questions, throw them up in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them. I'm going to play a blues using shell chords. And then I'll talk about what I'm doing. So let's see, maybe A is a good key. Jamie, David, keep playing a little bit. Maybe I'll change keys just to try something else. That's pretty much all shells, 90-something% shells. Now I'm going to mix it up a little bit and use shells and some other sounds as well. And I'm going to modulate again. Hey, Andy Wilson, thank you so much. Thank you. So I'll start with some non-shells and then go back to shells and then mix them up. So here's a chorus of blues in F without shells, doing other kinds of things. So that was not shells, and now I'll go back to shells. And then I'll do some mix and match. Now I'm going to do some mix and match. Maybe I should talk a little bit about shells, because otherwise I could easily just lose myself in playing, and that's not really what I came here to do today, but it is really fun. Hexpa, thank you. So I wanted to just talk here about shell voicings. Full disclosure, I have a new book out about shell chord voicings. It's called Shell Chords. So I may mention that book here a little bit. Shell chords are the power chords of jazz guitar. And when I say they're the power chords, they do have some things in common with power chords. Power chords mostly being things that we use in rock and maybe blues and some pop. Power chords, traditional power chords, are just root and 5. And generally, we're either going to play them with the root on the 6th string, like this. This would be G5 power chord. And if we have the root on the 5th string, then, so this would be root and 5, root on the 6th string, root on 5 on the 5th string. When the root is on the 5th string, then the 5 of the chord is on the 4th string. So power chords are sort of concentrated chords. They don't have all the harmonic information, but they have enough to suggest what's going on. So G5 isn't really a minor or major sound. It's just the root and the 5. C5, same. But we use these all the time, and it works just fine. So shell chords are kind of a jazzy version of that. They don't have the same chord tones. Instead of having root and 5, they have root, 3, and 7. So that's where they're different. The actual stuff they contain is different. But they are similar in that they don't tell you the full chord. Normally in jazz, we would want, if we're playing like G major 7, we'd have 4 notes. We'd have root, 3, 5, and 7. But shell chords leave out the 5th, so they're concentrated. They have just the stuff we need, but nothing extra. And so that's one thing they have in common, is that they're concentrated. And then the other thing is, as with power chords, we're going to have two sets of them that we need to learn. We need to learn where they are with the root on the 6th string and where they are with the root on the 5th string. Adam, that's a really good question. I want to come back to that. Let me just get some basic stuff across about shell chords, and then I'll answer that, because that's a good question. So when we have the root on the 6th string, then we will skip the 5th string. I'm just muting it here. Hey, Jack. Muting the A string here with a little bit of the extra stuff of the pad of my index finger. And then the 7 is here, and the 3rd is here. So root 3, 7, or root 7, 3, if you're going lower down. That would be a G major 7 shell chord. And I think of this shape as the master shape when we've got the root on the 6th string. Because from here we can make just about any kind of chord that you would want to make just by altering the 3rd and or the 7th. So this is G major 7. If we flat the 7, then we've got G7. So major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, we flat the 3rd and flat the 7. And in most jazz tunes, those are the kinds of chords you're going to see. Major 7, dominant 7, minor 7. Now you might see minor 7, flat 5. It doesn't matter. You can still use the same shell, whether it's G minor 7 or G minor 7, flat 5, because the 5 is not included here. So it doesn't matter. Same thing with dominant. If the chord symbol is G7, flat 5, sharp 5, flat 9, flat 13, sharp 11, doesn't matter. This same shell is going to work for any of those because it doesn't have any of that stuff. So there's not going to be any kind of clash to worry about. And then there's two other forms here based off of this shape. We could have G6. So that's root and the 3rd, and now the 6. So we've been talking about the major 7 or the flat 7. Now we could go all the way to 6. So that's G major 6th, and if we make it minor, G minor 6th. So we've got a lot of different kinds of chords that we could get at with these shapes. I guess one other chord that comes up once in a while is minor major 7. So of course that's got the flat 3rd and the major 7. So you need to know your formulas for how to build different types of chords. Okay, so that's all the root on the 6th string. Now let's talk about root on the 5th string. So we'll change from G to C just because it happens to be right there. So now, slightly different setup. Instead of root 7, 3, now we've got root 3, 7. So there's no gap string here. But then all the same stuff would apply. This is C major 7 that we could think of as the master shape. And then C7, C minor 7, C minor 7 flat 5, C minor 7 sharp 5, C minor 9, and so on. It doesn't matter. Anything that's got C minor 7th as its foundation, we can use that. Same thing with the dominant. Here's C7 sharp 9, flat 9, sharp 9, flat 13, flat 9, sharp 11, whatever, it doesn't matter. C7 is C7. You don't like broken voicings instead when rooting on the 5th string? That's a good question. Those are useful as well. Those are useful, but generally speaking, for me, when I think about shell chords, I'm thinking about breaking the guitar into 3 distinct pairs of strings, each with its own role. So the 5th and 6th strings are going to be 4 bass notes. So we're going to have the root of the 5th, the bass note. And then the middle two strings, strings 3 and 4, I like to keep the 3 and 7 of the chord there, and I'll explain why in a moment. But then I put the color tones or melody stuff on the first two strings. So I think of the guitar in those kind of three strata. So the reason that I usually favor this for C major 7 rather than this for C major 7 is that this will allow for smoother voice leading when we're doing something. Let's say I'm just going around the circle of fourths. So this could be C major 7, F major 7, B flat major 7, E flat major 7, A flat major 7, D flat major 7. So you get this really nice, smooth voice leading all happening on these middle strings. That's C major 7, F major 7, B flat major 7, E flat major 7, A flat major 7, D flat major 7, and so on. And so it allows for smooth voice leading. And in jazz, we do often see chords moving that way, either chromatically around the circle of fourths or sometimes diatonically, like C major 7, F major 7, B minor 7 flat 5, E minor 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G 7, C major 7. And that really allows us to not be jumping around so much. It's just kind of smoother voice leading. Does that make sense, Expa? Right, plus you get the juicy bass, exactly. And if I use this for C major 7, then it's just a little less room to do anything melodic or colorful on top. The exercises that I just did, I would say if you're new to shell chords would be useful. So one is just going chromatically around the circle of fourths. Pick one chord type. So this is major 7, and I'm going C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat. You could do the same thing with dominant chords. D7, G7, C7, F7, B flat 7, E flat 7, A flat 7. You can do the same thing with minor chords. You start on B minor 7, E minor 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G minor 7. And then you could try mixing it up. You could go C minor 7, F7, B flat minor 7, E flat 7. So I'm alternating minor 7 and dominant qualities and so on. Just using the circle of fourths, C, F, B flat, E flat. That's where I'm getting all the roots from. And then the chord qualities would just be whatever you choose. So that's a good way to start to learn these shapes, get some muscle memory, get some vision on the fretboard. Another exercise that's useful is the diatonic circle of fourths, where we just use only the 7 available chords in any particular key. So if we're in C, the available chords are C major 7, F major 7, B minor 7 flat 5, E minor 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7, and C major 7. That was all with the root on the 6th string. Then I would do it with root on the 5th string, C major 7, F major 7, B minor 7 flat 5, E minor 7, E minor 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7, C major 7. I hope I did that right. I let my mind wander a bit. So that's root on the 5th string. Then we want to be able to toggle back and forth freely. So C major 7, F major 7, B minor 7 flat 5, E minor 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7, C, and so on. Yeah, Expo, those exercises are in the book. So yeah, there's a bunch of I call them preparatory exercises. Really, it's going to depend on how knowledgeable you are already, whether you want to go through the preparatory exercises first or get into the tunes first. It'll depend on how knowledgeable you are already and just how your mind works, how curious you are, If you're somebody who likes to read the manual when you buy a new thing, do the preparatory exercises first. If you're somebody who just throws the manual away or puts it in a drawer for later and just wants to start messing around, then you could just go right to the tunes in the book. I mean, so whatever works for you is fine. I trust that you've been playing long enough and studying long enough that you know how you learn best and what keeps you going and stuff. So you'll have to try it different ways. Same thing with the way the book is organized. The way that I wrote the book, there's 8 tunes in there, standard jazz tunes like "Here's That Rainy Day," "Straight No Chaser," which is a Thelonious Monk blues, "Gee Baby Ain't I Good to You," tunes that you might play on gigs. And the way I organize them, each tune gets 3 treatments. There's a treatment with just the shells. Then you turn the page, and then you get shells plus extensions, where I start adding some color tones. So we go from, instead of just like a 3-note dominant chord, now we might have a 4-note dominant chord with some kind of extension or color on top. So I go through the whole tune again with shells plus extensions. And then the last time is shells plus extensions plus what I call action, which has to do with more rhythmic activity, syncopation, displacement, and stuff like that. And also some passing chords, approach chords, things like that. So that's how I thought the book would be best presented. But you might find that you want to go through all 8 of the tunes as shells, then go back and do all 8 of the tunes as shells plus extensions, and then do the whole shebang. Whatever you like. There's no wrong way to do it. Andy Wilson, hold tight. I want to scroll back up because there's a question from a little bit ago that I never got around to. So Adam Berger says, any tips for memorizing more complex chord patterns and arrangements? I'm always quick to pick up the beginning of songs or arrangements, but then I seem to get stuck at a certain point. Any tips for memorizing more complex chord patterns and arrangements? Hey, Adam Berger, I'm curious. Well, if you're talking about arrangements, then I think you're talking about not just memorizing the way a tune goes in general, but maybe some specific, forms on the fretboard. So not just what are the chords to "Here's That Rainy Day," but you're talking about an arrangement, so that's a specific thing. Well, practice, of course. Other than just practicing, something that can be helpful is practicing without your guitar, trying to get the thing that you're working on to be really clear in your mind before you start moving your hands around. Because when you put your hands on the guitar, you may wind up making some mistakes, and you don't want to practice making mistakes. You want to, once you've set finger to string, you want to be sure of what you're doing. So I would say, if you're learning an arrangement, like you have a PDF or you're learning something from YouTube or something like that, try to get really clear about what it is in your head. Try to be able to hear what the harmony is. Try to be able to visualize it if it's something that exists as a visual thing, like a PDF or a video of somebody else playing it. And then visualize yourself playing it. If it's a tune that has an audio recording, if you're trying to learn something that there's already a record of, listen to it and sort of practice along in your mind. I would say, get to the guitar last. That's something that I found helpful. Also, thinking about whatever you're working on in phrases. So not just in this kind of microscopic measure by measure or grip by grip, but follow the natural cadences. try to think of things in phrases, even if it's as small as a 3-chord phrase like a 2-5-1, or a longer phrase, 4 bars, 8 bars. The more you can think of things in phrases, at least for me, the easier it is to memorize. When I try to just do grip by grip, chunk by chunk, if I don't have context for it, I find it harder to memorize. So Adam Berger, I hope that's helpful. Mike had a question. I'd be interested in a bit about the first blues you played, where it was all shells with no extensions, but you're playing melodically with shells. Yeah, okay. When I'm playing the shells, I'm trying to think, because shell chords are kind of like power chords in that we visualize them on the fretboard from the root, and then we add the other stuff. So like here's B flat 7, and then you add the other stuff. So this is the first kind of marker that I need to hit, and then the other stuff. We all do that, but I want to encourage you with shell voicings or any voicings that you've learned to also think of it from the top down. What is the melody? Because if you're not taking responsibility for the melody, then you're really missing an opportunity, a musical opportunity. Mike, you heard the melodies that were coming through. If I was just thinking about what's the bass note doing, I might be creating melodies because that's just a natural thing. Whatever the top of, the iceberg that's poking through the ocean, that's what people are going to hear. I might be concerned with what's below sea level just because that's how I visualize it on the fretboard. But most people are really going to be experiencing the iceberg because that's what is naturally going to draw attention. So just spend some time thinking about melody first. So I'm thinking, B flat 7, E flat 7, B flat 7, F minor 7, B flat 7, B flat 6, so I can get, or not B flat 6, B flat 7 with the 9 instead of 3. So this is a modified shell. And then I'm going to go to E flat 6 so I can keep this note where it was. And then E flat 7, E diminished 7, B flat 7, D minor 7, D flat diminished 7, C minor 7. So I get this. And then F7, or if I want to keep this note on top and do something more colorful, I might use B major 7. So I might go C minor 7, C flat major 7, B flat 6, G7, C sharp minor 7, C minor 7. I'm really thinking about what's happening on this string. So it's just, I don't know that there's anything I can say except just to change where your focus is. Focus on what's happening on the top string rather than on the bottom string. If you've done some of the preliminary exercises, hopefully the chord shapes, the actual grips, will take care of themselves as you change your focus. I mean, it's not any harder to focus on the melody than it is to focus on the bass. You're playing 3-note chords and you're paying special attention to one of the 3 notes. Why does that note have to be the bass note? Why can't it be the top note or the middle note, for that matter? But that's not going to address your question, which is playing melodically. So Oh, Ben, that's super nice to hear. I'm really glad. It seems like you're talking about the tip that the six jazz chords are all you need. I'm glad that that's been useful. I really think shell chords are super useful and valuable to anybody who's doing anything that's in the jazz realm at all. These forms might not help you that much on a on a pop gig or a folk gig, but maybe they would. I think of them as jazz related because they the kinds of chord qualities that we're dealing with, major seven, minor seven. Uh, some styles of music don't even use seventh chords that much. So these would be most useful once you get into seventh chords, but it doesn't mean they're exclusively for jazz. Um, anyway, Ben, I'm glad to hear that was useful. Wow, lots of questions. Um, I like how you get to avoid that pesky diminished chord when you play diatonic shells. Uh, Andy Wilson, sorry off topic. Could you show some ideas, phrases of lyrical slow solo on a standard 2-5-1, A minor 7, B minor 7, flat 5, E7 in first open position, last three chords? Um, Andy, I think that's a good question. I'm going to pass only because it is, yeah. I really this stream is really about shell chords and soloing and phrases is such a different thing. I'll do a video on that. Maybe I'll do my next sometime next month. I'll do one on soloing, but I've uh, publicized this or promoted it as a shell chords thing. So I want to stick to the topic of chords. But if that's something you're interested in, and if other people here are interested in soloing and improvisation and stuff, I'll make that my next YouTube stream. So thank you for asking, and sorry I'm not going to get into it right here. Hayden Smith, would you say that thirds and fifths give a note the most tonal character, thinking about shell chords as jazz intervals? Would you say that thirds and fifths give a note the most tonal character? Thirds and fifths. Thinking about shell chords as jazz intervals. Hayden, I think I'll need meant chord, not note. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand. Give a chord. Now I see your other note. And Dave has already answered. Yeah. So these voicings don't have the fifths. They have thirds and sevenths. And I wouldn't say they give the most tonal character. In a way, they give not a lot of character. That's kind of the idea. They're meant to be a little bit chameleon-like, where they have character in that they tell you what quality of chord we're playing. They really are clear that this is a minor seven chord, right? If I play some voicing like this for C minor 7, you might not hear that as C minor 7 at all. You might hear that as something different because I'm not playing the root, first of all, and I'm adding other notes like the 9 and the 11. So you might not hear that as C minor, even though I'm thinking about it that way. Whereas if I play this, so maybe we're just using different language to say kind of the same thing. So it gives it the most definition, the most tonal definition, but character, I also think of, when I think of character, I think of color. So we're not adding a lot of color, but we're definitely defining the elemental nature of whatever chord we're playing. So that's the idea with shell chords, that we're not coloring, we're just defining. Jamie, thoughts on finding chords outside the typical diatonic world? Leading chords, etc. Diminished is obviously a go-to, but curious to find others. Thoughts on finding chords outside the typical diatonic world? Yeah. Well, there's so much possible. I guess one thing that you could do is coming back to what I was saying to Mike's question about melody. Okay, so Jamie, finding chords outside the typical diatonic world. A way to do that could be start with a shell chord and let's add one note. And this is C major 7. And now what I want to try doing is keeping that G on top as I descend chromatically. And just see what happens. So now what I've got is C major 7. Now I've got B major 7 with a G on top, which we could say is B major 7 sharp 5. B flat major 7 with a 6. A major 7 with a flat 7. Pretty wild sound. A flat major 7 with the G. And in that case, since we've already got a G, what I might do is replace this G in the shell with F and then move the G over here. So we don't have the doubled notes. We're still getting 4 notes. It's a pretty nice sound. A flat, F, C, G. Then G major 7 with G. F sharp major 7 with G. F major 7 with G on top. That's really nice. E major 7 with G. You'd have to find a special place to use that chord. It's not going to work in a lot of songs, but it's pretty cool. E flat major 7 with the G. Again, I probably want to avoid doubling the note just because it's a waste. So I might put the flat 5 in there. Or the 6. So I'm still thinking E flat major 7 shell, but because I've got this G on top, I want to do something different over here. If you can reach it, you could try putting the 2 back here. That could be cool, or anything like that. Yeah, so that's a neat exercise, just to take one chord quality and have the same note on top and just try moving it. I like to do stuff like that. It's an experiment, and you may get 1 or 2 useful chords out of it. A totally different way to approach it would be to just learn tunes that have a lot of non-diatonic stuff in them, like Stevie Wonder's stuff from the mid-70s. He lands on some chords that you would never expect, and yet they seem to be totally part of the song. I don't know what he's thinking or how he approaches it, but transcribe some Stevie Wonder songs or learn some Joni Mitchell songs from the 80s, and don't worry too much about the tunings. I mean, you could really get into what tuning is she using and how is she getting those sounds, but you could just try to learn the tunes as melody and chords. She gets into some really surprising non-diatonic stuff. Again, that's different than understanding the theory of it. You'd have to do your own figuring out of what's going on there, because Joni Mitchell and Stevie Wonder don't include instruction manuals with their records or explanations. It just is what it is. There's a tune that I was just learning recently. This tune by Edgy Lobo that has some really neat non-diatonic colors in it, and uses some shell kind of stuff in the verse. The chords are in the song, so the song's in A minor, and the verse chords are A minor 6, and then this chord, which you can either think of G sharp diminished with an E added, or you might think of it as like E7 flat 9. F is the flat 9 of E, and it's got the G sharp on the bottom. So this could be E7 flat 9 over G sharp. Then it goes C minor 7 over G, and then this chord, and I'll just shut up and play it. bridge is beautiful. Yeah, and then the intro has a major 7 sharp 5 chord in it. So yeah, Brazilian music, uh, late 60s, 70s, there's tons of non-diatonic stuff that somehow just magically sounds accessible, even though if you looked at it through the lens of like jazz or something, it would seem pretty wildly colorful, but totally makes sense in the song. So Jamie, that was a long explanation, but that's where I would look. That's where I would look. For me, that's where I've gotten a lot of ideas from. Joni Mitchell, Stevie Wonder, Brazilian music. Okay. Lucas Williams says private lesson info. If anyone is interested in a private lesson, you can just email me, lessons@adamlevy.com. Lessons@adamlevy.com. I want to also make sure I include a link to my Shells book in case anyone is curious to check it out. Gosh, do you ever find yourself using extensions within your shell voicings? Man, I love it. Dave has got a whole side thing going on over here. He's answering questions faster than I can even get to them. I love it. Thank you, Dave. I don't know how to say your last name, but it looks like Dykeson. Dave Dykeson. Thank you for answering some questions. Ben Braidfoot says, do you ever find yourself using extensions within your shell voicings, i.e. replacing your third with your ninth or 11th? Yeah, so that's exactly right. So that would be like the next level. Once you understand the shell, so like this is B flat major 7, you could use 9 instead of 3. So here's 3 on top, here's 9 on top. So, or there it is. Sorry, root 7, 3. Now here it is with root 7, 9. Here's E flat major 7. I'm going to substitute 2 for 3. So yeah, totally. Or substitute 6 for 7. Yeah, of course. The purest form of shell chords is just root 3 and 7, and those will be useful most of the time. When you start messing with the formula, you'll find fresher sounding chords, things that sound less obvious. And so the applications might be a little different. You know, if you're playing in a big band, those kind of chords might not sound idiomatically correct if you're playing in a band that plays swing tunes or something. But if you're trying to do something more modern or original or fresh, yeah, you can take shell chords and alter them any way you like. Like in my book, I mostly talk about taking the shell and adding stuff to it. So you can add the fifth or the flat fifth. You know, when you're in this form, the fifth is here, so the easiest thing to add or alter or whatever is something relating to the fifth or the sixth. And when the root is on the fifth string, the closest thing would be the ninth. So we might have the 9. We've also got this like sharp 11 on top. So in my book, I'm mostly talking about adding stuff on top of the shells, but of course you can swap stuff out. There's also these kind of voicings that I think of as shell-like, like this chord is B flat major 7, root 7, 2, 3. So the shell is really these 3 notes. I can't get my hand to do what I want it to do. Yeah, these are the shells here, and then this is a an extension note, or the 9. And so we could make B flat major 9, B flat 9, B flat minor 9, and so on. I'm going to run out of time pretty soon because I need to stop on the hour. But I just want to show you a couple other things about shells that aren't in the book that might help you take them beyond just playing kind of rhythm chords. When we've got the root on the 6th string, you know, this string is E and this string is E. So anything you can play here, you can play 2 octaves higher here, right? That just makes sense. So you could take these shells from being these bottom heavy rhythm, useful for rhythm chords, to more melodic by just moving the melody here. So this would be, or moving the root, I should say, here to the melody position. So this would be B, stop playing the B string, the major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, minor 6. That's all with the B flat on top. It's still a shell shape. I've just moved it from here to here. So that's something that you could experiment with for maybe solo guitar arrangements. So I'm doing the thing I talked about in the beginning, moving the 3rd and 7th around on these strings and doing melody stuff on top rather than on the bottom. Same as instead of having the root on the 5th string for like E flat major 7, we could move the root to the 2nd string, an octave higher. So now we've got this E flat major 7. You don't have to tuck your ring finger in. I'm just doing it for visual clarity here. E flat 7, E flat minor 7. So you can get into stuff like this. So stuff like that. One thinking of the 3rd and 7th here and moving the root on top and then playing melodically by just moving it around a little bit. Always interesting to hear the Ted Green inspiration in your chord voicing. Yeah, Ted was a major, major, major influence for me. I don't think I got to all the questions, but I'm going to look one more time. Okay, Clive, I see that Dave answered your question, but I'm going to look at shells. Also seem great for simple comping, but what tips do you suggest for developing that rhythmic pulse, the swing? Yeah, so I agree with Dave that you want to use your metronome a lot. If you have a metronome that you can do things where it drops out, that would be really useful. So maybe it plays 8 beats and then drops for 4 silently and then 8 again. So it's kind of like having training wheels, and that might be even too much. Maybe you have it do 16 beats and drop out for 2 and then come back in or something. So you don't want to start at a place that you just can't hang with at all. But I think gradually having the metronome do less and less of the work and taking the training wheels off is what you want to do to develop your swing feel. So an app that I like is called Time Guru app, and that has a random mute feature where you just have a slider that lets you the thing will drop out anywhere from 1% to 100%, I guess, of the beats, and you just adjust how much you want it to drop out. Or you could have a metronome, I guess, that you program to play 3 bars of clicks and then a bar with no clicks, or just whatever. Like there's different ways you could achieve the same idea. But I think over time, no pun intended, you need to take more and more and more responsibility for keeping the rhythm going yourself. So that's really important. Also, listen to music that has the rhythmic feel that you like. So if you're trying to play like the Count Basie band, or like Freddie Green in that band, listen to that band. But if you're trying to play with a different sensibility, listen to as much of that stuff as you can, and try playing along with the record. See if you can phrase your rhythm in a way that you disappear into the music. It might happen just for one beat or two, but with enough practice, you can have those moments last longer and longer. Same thing with the metronome. Even when you play with the metronome, you might find that you have a moment where you're like, wait, did it click just there? Or I can't tell because you were so in sync with the click that it just, you're playing and the click became one. So you're not even sure. So that's important too, is, the click is just a way to keep you on the grid. But eventually you want to have such a strong internal sense of time that you, you don't have to have a metronome to play in strong time. It's just something to play with. Metronomes are pretty useful, especially now when we can't just go out and play with people. So you could even just look at it that way. Don't look at it as like this taskmaster that's, hitting you over the knuckles with a ruler on every beat, but just it's somebody to play with. And if you were playing with a real person, you need to listen to them and synchronize with them, and at the same time play with your own feel. It doesn't mean that you're in lockstep. It's just it's doing a thing, you're doing a thing, and you're all kind of moving forward at the same pace. I'll mention one more time my book if you all are interested. It's called Shell Chords. It's available just as a PDF. You can download it and print it yourself. It's on Bandcamp. I've mentioned it. I'll mention it again. Thank you all for tuning in. Oh gosh, do I visualize diatonic shells rhythmic cage system? Ben, no. I think of caged as a different thing from shells, but also a super valuable system. Jamie, thank you for being here. Ben Braidfoot, Fingelfin, Lucas William, Adam Berger, Hayden Smith, Dave Dykeson. I hope I got everybody. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Take good care. Oh, Robert too. Bye-bye.